Hello and welcome once again to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast show, powered by citiesabc.com and openbusinesscouncil.org, soon to be rebranded businessabc.net. We've been talking about the importance of personalities, business, and showcasing the best people that are doing fantastic things in terms of the world of business, technology, and as well relationships when it comes to actually the day-to-day operations of business. And definitely we learn with a lot of our peers, with a lot of personalities, and we keep actually finding new challenges and new opportunities as well. I always like to look at the two things together. So today I am very excited to welcome once again to our series of Sharon Constançon. So Sharon was actually already here. You have all the links for the previous interview we did. So Sharon is it has a lot of different hats, let's put it that way. She's a very high-profile business lady that has been showing a leadership in multiple levels. Part of that is probably well known in the relationship with the South Africa UK Chamber of Commerce, and as well leading multiple companies that are quite interesting and making bridge between UK and Africa and South Africa, but a lot of different areas. So today, one of the things I want to talk is precisely about leadership, business, trade corridors, and as well about one of our companies that I particularly find very interesting, that is Genius Boards. And just as a small introduction, so you can find information about Sharon, both on the wiki that we create around this, and of course what is here on the podcast and the places where you're finding. But just for you to see, her profile is really impressive from the different achievements, both as chairman of the South African Chamber and the CEOs of the Genius boards, and as well working in a lot of relationships as non-executive directors for Transact SA, and an international committee member for CISI, and also the CEO of Valufin, a forex advisory firm. There's much more hats, but we'll talk about that during today. So welcome again, Sharon. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you very much. And it's always an honor to be here. I always have a lot of fun. And we go down all sorts of paths that do bring back good memories. And actually, it's very inspiring and energizing. So I'm looking forward to this next, whatever period you're going to keep me together with you.
Thank you. So Sharon, one of the things I want to start in the last call, of course, we on the last interview, we talk a lot about the South African context, because a lot of people don't know about it unless you are South African. And South Africa, of course, is a country with a lot of nuances. But you are I would say, out-of-the-box entrepreneur with a lot of different hats that can actually manage multiple international projects and corridors, which is quite a difficult task, especially being in South Africa, a country that has quite a lot of challenges and differences. So tell us a bit about how you juggle to start these different hats and these different areas that you were working, and some of them with very high-profile organizations.
Thank you very much, Dinis. And it's nice to know somebody understands how busy I am, really. Some people just make a comment and don't actually totally get some of the stuff. But just to give you an idea, at the moment, I'm running training for probably one of the largest central banks in Africa on governance. I'm working for an international payments company, training them on duties and responsibilities of a director. I'm working with a sports body on understanding board level risk management. So that's just 3 projects I'm working on this week alone. At the same time, still in my governance space, I am working with an organization that is, talk about me being an entrepreneur, here's an organization that has grown up very entrepreneurially, lots of young people in a country that is really struggling to become a contender in sort of, let's call it the real global economy. So if you look at the whole Balkan region, there are 8 countries in the Balkans. So here we are upskilling the governance in the Balkan countries of Europe. Yeah, that's just so totally different again. And then within my chamber role is working with all the organizations that are in South Africa and helping to promote trade, to deliver events, to write white papers, to talk to some senior business leaders, to do networking events. We reopened our Cape chapter end of October. We ran a very interesting event on ESG, and probably one of the most interesting events on ESG that I have come across. Entirely women panel, not intended, it just turned out that way. And here you've got 5 incredibly powerful women. Put myself in that box as well, by the way. So you've got 5 incredibly powerful women who know ESG from my point of view, which is governance, somebody else who knows it from the point of view of the law, others who know it from the point of view of financing, economics, and general business. So when you talk about leaders, there were 5 really powerful leaders talking about the modern agenda that we have to get ourselves onto. So leadership coming around in a circle, it's really important as leaders that we have to accept certain agendas are now the important ones. And we have to look at things like ESG, which I don't call ESG, I call G, S, and E. It's like our GSE exams here in the UK, where we've got to look at governance first, then we look at our people, and then we have the headspace to do something about our planet. So let's get those the right way around. So we work a lot in leadership. One of the things that I think probably challenges leaders the most is personal agendas. The personal agendas of other people around you, on your board, doing business with people who are trying to become members, people that are who are in the what you call procurement departments of other organizations trying to get their mate in for you, whichever it happens to be. So we come across this aspect of business bias, personal agenda, very, very potently, unfortunately, in business environments. And I think as a message along the topic of leadership is making sure you know, as a leader, what is the straight and narrow? What is the right thing to do for the organization? What is the right thing right now, however difficult it might be? What is the right thing to do? And there's been twice in my life where I've had to call out, no, it's not going to work like that. I'm calling up my governance trump card, and I'm saying that is not the right thing to do for the organization. And therefore, we have to take some difficult decisions. And I think leaders need to be mindful that that is sometimes what they have to do. And it is not easy under any circumstances, especially because it involves people. And we always run away from handling the difficult conversation with a person. We'll have it with a computer, we'll have it with an email. We won't have it with a human face to face. So it does create a lot of challenges for leaders to be effective when you've got difficult, demanding, biased, influenced individuals around you. And I just say, please stand tall. If you're right, you will win.
Well, you touch a lot of things, and all of them super critical. So let's touch the ethics of leadership, which is what I think you touch here. So you mentioned ESG, and of course, at the moment as we speak, there's a lot of things on a lot of backlash, even about the concept of ESG. Then there's leadership 360 and the ethics of leadership. So let's start by the ethics of leadership, because it's a broader one and is not dependent of any present day-to-day changes. From your experience and from dealing with a lot of boards, a lot of different, you mentioned the Balkans, I mentioned South Africa, you are in the UK and you have different nuances. And then there's female leadership, male leadership, which is as well a big thing, to say less. So as a female leader that has been dealing with a lot of different countries and boards of very powerful organizations, and as well leading a lot of coaching and activities on that. What would be the highlights that you want to bring to people listening to us, especially when it comes to leadership?
So firstly, let's step back one step into the conversation you had about ethics. We often see the word integrity appearing in governance codes or in codes of conduct, things like that. We see the word integrity quite often. The word we don't see very often is the word ethics. And believe it or not, it does not even appear in the UK Corporate Governance Code. We do not have that word in our code. But South Africa, King 4, which is probably recognized as one of the more advanced codes in the world, does have the word ethics. They actually even recommend a social and ethics committee of the board. So there's a society that has gone from being a pariah state who has led through Mandela a period of very strong ethics that they are now carrying forward into the future. We've had a few false starts in between, some seriously horrible false starts in between. But it's utilizing that importance of human ethics, doing the right thing by our economy, and not being involved in corruption, crime, state capture, and all the other things that do occur if we are not leading ethically. So it's really important for leaders now, whether they are politicians, whether they are big corporates, or whether they're companies running entrepreneurial businesses or guys in a cash economy. I remember when I was young and we started doing foreign exchange dealing. And as a dealer, we had no contracts, we had no written tools, we had no recordings, we had nothing other than our integrity, our ethics, and our word is our bond. That would hold us to any transaction we'd agreed upon. So I take us back to that, is we should be proud, hold our heads high as leaders and say we did the right thing. The most important thing we can do is to do the right thing at all times. So navel gaze, be self-aware, be risk-empowered around this word of ethics and ethical leadership, because it is very easy, very, very easy to get sidetracked with somebody else's loud, noisy, emotional agenda. And I encourage people to then also step up and do the difficult thing sometimes, which is to call no. I use that as just a term when you are saying that the current activities are not good enough. So I do ask chairs of organizations to have their antennae out, listening to their pestle environment, political, economic, trade, all the external influences that impact our companies. Have we got a listening ear out there? And are we listening to the right messages within those, the right ones we should be listening to? Have we made sure as companies we've onboarded the ESG, the DE&I, the internal stakeholder well-being agendas? Have we thought about those things well enough? Are we looking after our people? That's something that pre-COVID was not a board agenda item. They were a dispensable cost. Whereas now I think we're recognizing that our people are critical, that we should teach them with respect. So I ask immediately for leaders to consider the HR function within an organization, the people function, the stakeholder function, external stakeholder functions are all critical to our reputation as a business, and risk managing a bad reputation is very, very difficult and requires lots of energy and lots of willpower and lots of work to turn that big negative ship around. So don't go there. Try and see if you can find a way to do things right first time.
So thank you so much for excellent insights and advice. So I have to go. Let's go on the nitty-gritty, because this is a Pandora box of different questions that you can take out of this. But as a key element, like you just mentioned, because if you don't take ethics serious, they get back to you and they can destroy you. And this is actually a big challenge nowadays, because in one end, things are becoming more transparent with digital, but in one end, they become as well more blurred, because you have fake transparency, you have a lot of different things. But you touch the basics, and that is always what I like. So from your experience, and I had a couple of challenges recently around ethics. And sometimes it might just things that you want to help someone, and that person gets excited, that brings you to some context, and suddenly you get in a dead end that is very dangerous. Or it might be that you are part of something, and suddenly out of nowhere someone appears that has a very dubious reputation, to say less. And unfortunately that happens almost very often, or it should be less often, but very often in business. So from your experience in being on boards in chambers of commerce and as well in international relationships, what would be the guidelines to, first of all, look at the ethics, and when to see the red lights? Because the challenge sometimes is people get excited, and I don't think anyone wants to be a bad player or being unethical, unless you are really criminal, but that is more difficult. But what would be the kind of rules that you learned from your experience and the wisdom on this? Because you have quite a lot of experience as well in coaching and in dealing with a lot of companies.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to a quote by Mandela, who says, "We weren't born evil, we just learned it." I might not be paraphrasing it perfectly, but that's the meaning. We don't come to our boards of directors, our executive groups, to our offices with the intention of being harmful. As you say, there are exceptions. But we do intend to be directors of an organization, executive directors of an organization, and the next team, senior leadership teams. And we do intend to be able to do a good job and to be proud of what we want to do. So that's our personal ethics, our personal authenticity. It's our personal doing our best for ourselves and our self-pride as much as we possibly can. So we get that one right. The rest is natural. The rest just follows through. I'm not doing the right thing so that you're impressed. I'm doing the right thing because I know it's the right thing to do, and I'm impressed. As a result, the company that I'm operating for and on behalf of, they are the winner. That's where the winners are, is the business can now grow. It can be empowered. The team around you are empowered because you are doing the right thing. You're calling out inappropriate activities. You're calling out inappropriate mind games, topics, nuisance factors, all sorts of things that we see so many times. So when I'm coaching chairman particularly, is as a chairman, you need to understand all the languages that your people are speaking. That is word, it's written, it's their body language, it's sign language they might be using, drop notes, couple of, just quick things on the fly. They are constantly communicating with themselves and the world all the time. And company secretaries are really good at this. My profession, one of the people I train as well, I train many students a year on boardroom dynamics and how to understand this element of tone from the top, defined ethics that we need to stand by. And company secretaries, either they breed it or they are made like that in the first place. And I haven't quite undone that one yet to work out which of the two it is. They tend to be able to read all these languages that one person is sharing with you. And I think one of the things I would say to a chairman, if you want to get your tone right, if you want to create a safe place for your team to operate within, you have to understand them. So understand yourself. Isn't there a song by ABBA saying, knowing me, knowing you? So how can I understand where you're coming from if I don't understand myself first? So I do encourage leaders to be self-aware. Now, that might be taking a couple of character assessments. It might be making sure that you speak to people who say, what do you look like from the outside when you do things? So how do you appear to others? Get feedback, understand how people see, because invariably we've got rose-tinted glasses on rather than reality. So hear it from others, learn from others, and become the most authentic leader you can with your eyes, ears, and every other sense working for you. Quite often I will say to a chairman, how did you feel about that one? They had this whole discussion. They came to a decision. How did you feel? I wasn't mad about it, but it's what happened. So if you had it again, would you want a different answer? You probably would. You say, well, then what are you going to do about it? How are you going to manage the next stage of this program so that you get the program back on track? You may not be in a position to undo a decision that's made, but as a leader, as an authentic leader, as somebody who's mindful of their people who are both system one and system two thinkers, one person can think very, very quickly. The other person needs 2-3 days to reflect. You need to make sure that all these people can come along a journey. And effectively, you're asking a leader to be a bit more like a chameleon. When I'm talking to you, I can think fast. When I'm talking to the finance director, I might need to give him time between sentences to reflect. So how do you lead that you land your leadership successfully with the recipient? So it's not that you're not being authentic. It's how you are engaging all your senses so that the person you are engaging with, internal stakeholder, external stakeholder, actually gets what you want them to hear, listen, understand, whatever it may be. I hope that carry on gave you the answer you were looking for.
No, this is a very important thing that everyone goes through. And like you said, the way you go through this is it can make a career or break a career. And as well, sometimes you get picked in things you're not expecting. So, and especially you are in international trade, becomes much more challenging because, of course, the sums are bigger. And sometimes for small things, you can destroy a lot of things that take years or decades to achieve. So you touched the boards and you touched different things. So you're leading as well the Genius boards. So tell us about the company and how it works.
Okay. Genius Boards has been around for about 13 odd years. It grew out of primarily the activity post the credit crisis globally, and the government called on Sir David Walker to do the Walker Review of governance in the UK. And out of that came a couple of governance ideas of how boards could be better at what they were doing. So that was where I started, was with our first new style UK corporate governance code. So we are working with the codes, with companies, with regulation, legislation, that they need to be able to review their competence, capability, effectiveness, performance, structure, mix of skills, diversity, ability to make decisions, to be able to lead the organization, to work with the executives in a symbiotic, aligned relationship. How do we stretch our execs to be even better? So those are all the things that Genius Boards does and engages with companies from board to senior management level, right from the point of training, understanding how they're working, to actually performing an evaluation and giving them a recommendation governance plan of how they can actually get themselves to be in a better place than they are now. And everyone can improve, even the best board in the country, in the world, can learn something new and be a step better. Not only can they grow themselves, is our environment is constantly evolving. Around us, there is always change. And that constant change that ensures that a board has to always be looking at its performance, looking at its behavior, finding out what the modern world is wanting of boards today, which is different to even a year ago or before COVID. We expected very different behavior from the boards. If I look at my father and the business he had and the way he worked with his boards, the way we do today, you wouldn't even call it the same activity. It is so vastly different, the way we have to behave in a boardroom environment today. So what we do is we help just shine a light clearly and with absolute clarity on the areas a board can look at and say, well, I can do that little piece. That little piece is actually quite easy. I can get my mind around that. And they immediately see benefits and see the value of making the change at that level. And so you work through a program of improvement over a period of a year to get that board to be a very beneficial leading structure to the organization of which it is the board. I think that probably covers enough for you.
Definitely. So,
I can talk forever on my own company.
No. This is great. This is great. And I think it's very important because in the end of the day, one of the things in my career, probably the most important that I learned was about governance and how you build the governance of a board, how you build the governance. Whatever is an SME or a medium or a big corporation, the problems are the same. So I want to touch one thing. So you touched the ethics, we touched the leadership, we touched the board. Let's touch the ego. I want to touch, and I know that is a big one, but I have to touch this because it actually becomes a very inspiring and especially related. I know that you are super straightforward on this. So how do you manage the ego on the boards and on the leadership, especially with the projects quite big that you're dealing, where you have a lot of testosterone and all different things on these boards and these organizations?
And you also have different character types, where you have the character types that are ranging from totally malleable and trusting and friendly to those that are manipulative, distant, on some of the social spectrum scales of complexities. And all of these people bring something different to the board environment. We need all of these characters. I talk about quotients, and we have lots of different, we've got 11 quotients, and one of them actually is a neurodiversity quotient, that you do bring these different styles of behavior to the boardroom. Now, you talk about ego. Ego obviously plays quite strongly in your neurodiverse environments. The ego responds differently. The ego will react differently. The self-protection or to turn into attack mode that we often get in certain of our character makeups. Some people won't blame at all. They'll take responsibility and they say, okay, that's fine. I've learned. I'll help make it better. But a large percentage of your people who tend to equally at the same time have a high ego could be correlated to this. And their stance and response is usually that of you're wrong, I'm perfect. And that is a very difficult response, knee-jerk reaction to try and work through. So whenever I'm working with the board, you will very quickly determine who's at risk of that style of behavior, who needs the ego being stroked, who needs this job so that they can brag, their granny's proud of them, or whatever it is, or they can hold their head high in their peer group environments. The other part that goes very closely with ego is the ability to drive their income. So with ego comes high income, high incentives, high risk. We call it bet the company kind of style of leadership, where people will do anything for their benefit and they put themselves on the agenda rather than the organization on the agenda. And people that get to that place are quite dangerous for the organization. And I've seen some horrendous stories we don't have time to share with now. But ego can literally destroy a company. It can destroy a team. It can destroy a person in that role if those around it actually bring to bear proper governance. So it is very, very self-destructive. But a lot of people who are in that style manage to stay around a lot longer than they should do and create a lot more damage than they should do because the rest of the team are too scared, literally too scared, to bring the topic up of a person in the organization, usually CEO, chairman, or somebody else senior, that is actually causing this degree of disruption. And I did work once with a chair who was on the spectrum hugely and was very destructive of people in ensuring that what he felt for the company was right. So he wasn't always doing it for himself. He was actually quite an interesting character. He was doing it for the growth of the company, but he would stand on anything and anybody at any point in time. Didn't matter who, to achieve his goals. So it's one of the things that we've got to watch out with. And when we're doing a performance review, one of the things we focus on is what style of engagement do I need for that style of person to gain the value of the interview, the feedback session, the journey we might take them on over 3 sessions because they need time to reflect or their ego is not going to accept all of this in one go. So it really is important that somebody in the process of coaching, mentoring, supporting leaders, training leaders, needs to have more than their fair share of EQ. If we've got EQ, we can communicate and we can get ourselves around these complexities more easily than those that don't. I think there's a stat saying the top 25% of the leaders in the world or the US have a disproportionately high EQ.
I want to touch one thing in what you mentioned. So the emotional intelligence, it's a key element, but as well at the moment we are in a quite complex world and they touch because you are as well dealing with big organizations, but I deal with a lot of companies, especially the chambers of commerce and in the coaching. So in one end, we have all these kind of mega companies and mega corporations that in most of the cases have more power than most of the countries in the world. If you look at Apple, the valuation of Apple is the size of the UK economy. And the UK is the 6th economy or 7 in the world. And of course, we have actually an interesting case study I would like to use here. For instance, if you look at Steve Jobs as a CEO and Tim Cook are completely diametral paradox opposites, because Tim Cook is very discreet and he actually effectively created a massive successful company. But Steve Jobs started first, and ego was definitely one of the issues that he's known for. So from your experience, and now I'm looking at the nitty-gritty of dealing with these things, and I think it's particularly interesting because startups, like you mentioned, you need to have a sense of independence, a sense of ego to go in front of an investor and show something, and as well to be trusted like multiple times until you get some funding or at least you get some sales, and understand how to build this value and keep going, like you mentioned. So from your experience, especially dealing with different people, coaching and these organizations, is there any kind of rules that you found that you'd like to share with us? Because I always like to learn with everyone, especially people like you can teach us a lot.
I think one of the key learnings of being a successful leader and coping and having a good coping skill is actually to learn your own and develop your own resilience. Now that sounds great. What does that really mean? I chatted to a lady who worked with Virgin, and she got to the age of about 35 and literally hit the anxiety wall and fell in a heap. And that was the end of her in that form of career. So there are areas and elements of us who cannot do it as well as others. So let's accept that within our own DNA, we might be more anxious. We might be, and anxious is the big one that does hold people back from being able to give of their best. But the saying is, how do you judge a good leader? A good leader and a good learner is somebody who gets up as many times as they get pushed down. So whenever we have learned a hard lesson and it's not been a pretty place, is learn the lessons of why that went wrong. What can we do to actually pick ourselves up, learn from that, and move on to a slightly different track, because doing the same thing again is only going to end up with the same answer. So let's do something a little differently, and how are we going to learn from that? And in the process of making those nuanced changes in our learning, when we get ourselves up again and we realize, actually, I got a lot further before something else got in my way, we are breeding resilience. What we're learning is that not succeeding is not the end of the world. When we do our first new businesses and we go out for our first sale, and inevitably our first 100 might end up with a no answer, at least of all the first one, and how mortified you are at that point that you're never going to be successful in your business, and you sort of transfer all of that angst across everything you do. And the most important is to learn, and I do say to people, literally take 10 deep breaths. Soon you'll be very practiced at it, and 3 will do. But calm your mind, calm your reaction, calm the angry words, calm the kicking back at somebody else because they hurt you, you're going to hurt them. Whether it's in words or in behavior or in ignoring people or whatever style it might be. Do we make ourselves as leaders the most consistent, trustworthy, trust is the word, it's a great integrity. So people would say, I know how that person is going to respond if I do X, because they are authentically themselves. They're not going to behave differently today because they had a bad night last night. They didn't sleep properly. And suddenly they're now going to misbehave today by reacting in a way they've never done before. Now, we've all got our complexities at home, in our sport, in our personal lives, in whatever. There are challenges everywhere. But we as leaders need to sit in this little box that we're all sitting in right now. Stay inside that box in terms of the way you respond to your environment so people can be safe to tell you the truth. There's nothing worse than reacting, making a noise, thumping your fist, and I've seen a few of those in my life. And then they're not going to tell you next time. They're not going to come and be honest or not share their doubts, in which case you are going to be leading everybody off the cliff edge, which is not actually where you were wanting to go. So we do have to create a trusted, trustworthy behavior and environment where people can say what is the most difficult thing that they need to. And one of the things I recommend boards do is they have 3 short meetings after a board meeting or a committee meeting or an exco meeting. And they quickly have just the board or committee members, and we discuss in an unminuted, safe environment, how did today go? Did that work? Did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? Then the executive directors leave and we've got only the non-executives. Anything we want to talk about that worries us about the business. Next level is the chairman leaves and you're left with just the non-executive directors. Now have we got a safe environment that we can ask the difficult questions? Because if I can voice them to my colleagues, we can all together deal with the issue that's in front of us. So the critical thing for directors and boards and chairs and CEOs is create a consistently appearing safe place that when something is going wrong, nobody has to call new. The safe place is going to come around and it'll be there. And I can be present and I know I'm going to be safe bringing up what I want because my colleagues will then share with me their views and am I the right or wrong.
There's a lot of wisdom on this, and I will repeat it myself to learn all these things. So from all the things we touched now, you touched initially in the beginning of the interview about ESG. So if you look at the top business trends that we are going, and this is just a summary. So we have things like remote hybrid work models, AI and automation, sustainability, and social responsibility, which we've been talking partly on this. And you can add as well digital literacy, personalization, and customer experience. So I'm very grateful because you touched a lot of fantastic things. So I want to touch on these business trends. One of the things I've been finding out going around the world and speaking in multiple events is, of course, this channel is a top channel in business and tech. And of course, a lot of the things we talk here normally are quite complex. And of course, you can learn a lot with people like you. But one of the things is really there's a lot of basic things that myself have to learn as well. And I'm saying basics in a good way, the sense of foundational areas. So coming back to these business trends, but as well from your perception of dealing with a lot of business around the world and boards and organizations, and you mentioned even governments. So from these business trends, what do you think is really important? Because we are in a paradox world, and it's a big question, but I want to make it simple, is that we have in one end AI and all these super advanced technologies, but in other end we have 400 million SMEs and micro SMEs, or the paps and mums, that actually are really the ones that bring money at the end of the day for most of the families. And even if you work in a board of an SME or a medium-sized company, most of them is the employees you have, how much money you pay in the end of the month, and how you keep going in the company and making a lot of efforts and a lot of striving to get results. So from these experiences and dealing with this, how do you see the macro technology, macro trends, and all these super hyper parts, and then the reality of what you're talking in the ethics, the day-to-day, the experience, and as well how we deal with the automations and all these different things?
Mm-hmm. I think with boards, if you take a look at the top level first, how long did it take us to get our mind around the web and the internet and living in a totally connected world permanently 24/7? We went on a journey of that one, picking up those various elements over time. And now it's every day for us. So there's always something new, challenging leaders, that we need to look at the ethics thereof, the risks thereof, the journey they might be taking us on. And the big thing we have with the automation world that we're in the artificial intelligence world that we're in, is since the time of the century where we started to get into the internet, therefore the black web, all the nasty part of our world, they're still there. Those things are more prevalent than ever before, but human beings like you and me don't see it. We don't touch it. We don't know about it. But it's there. There is a huge counter to our light world. There's a dark world. And the likes of things like AI, if designed in certain ways, put together in certain ways, pointed in certain ways, has experience in certain places, it doesn't know the difference. Now, we have a brain that does have that ethical element to its logic, whereas computer intelligence, I think we've got a way to go before we're going to build in ethics into its thinking process. So for any aspect of automation we're doing at the senior end of business, are we doing the right thing? Is the outcome what we're looking for? Is the answer accurate? Have we put our intelligent mind over its summary of data it can find? Somewhat different. We have to apply our intelligence on top of it. What we're sitting with in your SME market, your smaller end, your cash economy, if you look at many cash economies globally, particularly those in Africa, Asia, everything happens on a smartphone. The amount of business that is done through apps and through the use of intelligence and clever applications is completely different to what you were doing in small business 20 years ago. So that whole environment has actually empowered the SME environment to be able to deliver far more than a standard cash economy that is selling fruit and veg. So they can actually start to develop genuine businesses, genuine value-added business, not just food for the table. So that has empowered our cash economies, the bottom end of our strata of businesses, into something that is growing quite a lot. And I was privy to a conversation that was held by a tax authority that was advising a government. And the government wanted to try and tax this black economy, this cash economy, this secondary economy, third world economy, whatever it is. And they said, don't. Because if you do, you'll actually lose money in the end. Because what's happening now at that level is you've actually got a thriving business that is going around positively. It is paying VAT, for example. It's paying personal income tax in many cases. It may not be paying the same degree of business tax that it could, But what we should rather be doing than trying to tax them now is encouraging them to grow. Put good governance in, and you will get your taxes as that bottom end of the economy uplifts itself into a more medium strata aspect of our economies. And tech will be a huge support in that process that will bring the mom and pop businesses up the ladder. And how often do you ask somebody, and the first thing they do, mom and pop, is they take out a smartphone? It's quite incredible how cashless parts of Africa have become because of the way that the smartphone technology is working. So, Africa never ever rolled out copper telecoms throughout the continent at all. It leapfrogged over that and went the smartphone. We transfer money around the world on smartphones now, doing fancy international transfers. Wouldn't have dreamed of being able to do before. You can't even do it properly with your local high street bank, but yet you can do it on applications. So I think that the power of automation, the power of our digitalization, the power of blockchain, power of AI, the power of being able to create these multiple applications easily is really the future growth of our economies.
I subscribe completely, and you touched the most important. If you work this as a holistic, but as well practical, with pragmatism, we can find a lot of solutions. I know that we're running out of time, but I have to ask one last one. So, and of course, for people listening to us, just to understand, so Sharon leads multiple organizations, check her CV, but there's as well a Forex advisory, so a lot of Forex transaction, Forex exchange. But one of the things I want to highlight, and my last question is, so recently, you co-author with the Corporate Governance Institute insights around the corporate governance and the 2023 look back and 2024 governance predictions. Give us a summary on that, because of course it's a great way to wrap up an interview that touches a lot of these areas.
Yes, you just beat them. I've got that event is tomorrow that we're holding it, and an interesting panel, as I was talking about my ESG women-only panel. This happens as well to be a women-only panel, where we're going to be looking at what has governance driven in terms of business best practice this last year. What have been the new drivers that have come out into our business world? And then looking ahead, if we were to elevate ourselves out of our bodies, out of our continents and look down, what are the kind of risks, challenges, governance, leadership directions that businesses are going to be going in and are going to be led into and driven into? How are we going to be teaching our people? How are we going to be dealing with this blockchain AI environment? How are we going to circumvent some of the risks that these new technologies are bringing to us? And what is going to become critical for me? At the moment, we've had to bring leaders kicking and screaming to the governance table. That's compliance. Well, then I'm going to teach you how to spell. It's not compliance, it's governance. Governance is doing the right thing. It's not a tick box process at all. And I'm hoping that that degree of maturity we've seen a little bit of over the last few years. We have a new corporate governance code being released in the UK in January. It is a scaled down version on what we were expecting, hugely scaled down, but still there's a new code coming. And how are we going to get chairman, chief execs, boards to just take governance as being the most important element, foundation of business? If we get that right, the business can grow, it can build upon that governance foundation. And for me, the theme for this coming year is let's own governance. Let's make sure we do the right thing all the time by all our stakeholders, importantly, the business we work for.
Well, that's thank you so much. I have much more. We might do a take three, but I want to be respectful of your time. And you've been doing a fantastic work on the. Please, I ask you, for people listening to us, check Sharon Constançon, both the LinkedIn profile, all the work she does in terms of boards. There's a lot of work and links, and as well, we've been doing as well a lot of work in terms of education. We mentioned SU, we didn't have to touch more, but we touched on the leadership. In the end of the day, it touches all the different areas. So congratulations for this amazing work.
Oh, thank you.
And definitely it's an honor to have you here for the second time. Thank you so much.
And thank you for giving me a fun hour. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I appreciate the series. It's very interesting. Thank you.